It's a politically sensitive year for China, and confidence in the financial sector has plunged. A few months ago, 4 rural lenders in the northern province of Henan froze the deposits of hundreds of thousands of customers. State regulators have finally announced a second round of repayments to some of those account holders from next week. But as Patrick Fok reports from Beijing, this isn't the only banking crisis causing social unease.
For weeks, there'd been pockets of demonstrations. Then, one Sunday earlier this month, hundreds gathered in Zhengzhou, the capital of Henan province, demanding compensation. For months, they've been frozen out of their bank accounts with 4 rural lenders. Before long, thousands of security personnel appeared to suppress the protesters.
They'd rush over by the hundreds, grab somebody and beat them and kick them, regardless of whether it was men, women, the elderly or children, even people with disabilities.
Li Ming was one of the depositors there that day. That's not his real name, but Li Ming wants to keep his identity concealed, fearing possible retribution. A former taxi driver, he told us he'd deposited 1 million yuan, or around $150,000 into one of the banks that had blocked their customers' accounts. They were his family's savings, and they had entrusted him to invest the money.
The pain it has brought to us may be lifelong and could even affect our child's future.
The Henan bank scandal drew widespread attention even before the crackdown on protesters. Last month, many people in China were outraged after authorities turned some of the depositors' COVID-19 health codes red. That stopped them from traveling to demonstrate. It's not clear just how much money the victims have lost in this scandal, but some reports have suggested it could be in the tens of billions of yuan. Local police have blamed it on a criminal gang, saying it took over these banks and made illegal transfers through fake loans. Officials now say they'll start repaying some victims, but only those with up to 50,000 yuan in savings. Li and many others fear they'll never get the full amount back.
I think they're trying to recover the stolen funds. If they could recover what's been stolen, we wouldn't have had this kind of situation today. So I'm not optimistic.
This isn't the only crisis engulfing Chinese banks right now. Tens of thousands of home buyers across the country have been withholding mortgage payments on stalled construction projects. Many of them ran out of funds and are struggling to complete. Henan is again at the center. The capital, Zhengzhou, is where most mortgage boycotts have been recorded. Analysts say both cases point to weak government oversight.
The local authorities, and in the case of the mortgage crisis, it's the local housing departments, local housing administration departments. They're responsible for checking the accounts and making sure that developers use this money in an appropriate way. This has not happened.
Many developers have faced a cash crunch since Beijing began reining in easy credit to tame its debt pile. So far, banks say they can manage the risks from the mortgage crisis. But if it gets worse, it could threaten their credit profiles and pile more pressure on China's already strained financial system. For President Xi Jinping, the timing could not be worse. It comes just months ahead of the once every 5 years Communist Party Congress. There, he'll likely tout his success at maintaining stability as a reason to break precedents and stand for a 3rd term.
Diana Shoileva is chief economist at Enodo Economics, an independent consultancy she set up. Diana, we heard there about developers going bust, but also the misappropriation of funds. Are both these scandals, the real estate scandal and these frozen bank accounts, linked to corruption, basically?
Some of them are linked to corruption, but actually this is much bigger than that. There is general social discontent at the way Xi Jinping has changed how the economy runs in China and his economic policy, in particular his ideas about the housing and real estate market.
To what extent? How big are you talking? Because according to estimates, construction work, for example, has halted in the past year on 13 million apartments. Where could all this lead?
Well, look, I mean, there's the construction side, but there's also something even more important. The majority of household wealth is in housing. And Xi Jinping has declared that houses are for living in, not for speculation. So the assault of the authorities on the property sector with the idea as well to suppress house prices and lower the share of real estate investment in GDP is having profound impact on both the supply side and, if you'd like, the demand side. In China, people have very few outlets where they can earn a decent return on their savings, on their wealth. And they had poured into the housing market in expectation of ever rising house prices, which has been actually validated up until the last couple of years. And this is what this is all about, because, as you know, in China, people cannot go to the ballot box and express their discontent. So they do it in other ways. Part of the banking scandal was related to corruption, but it's not just that.
Mm-hmm. Diana, to bring us back to the real estate market, it's considered a safe and lasting asset, investing in property, to pass down to your kids and your kids' kids. You said that's changed. How's this going to affect the Chinese?
It has already been affecting them quite profoundly, especially when you consider and take into account the uncertainty of the severe lockdowns and, more generally, Xi's policy of income redistribution. So the well-off urbanites are feeling the pressure. Consumer confidence is low, and spending is in the doldrums. And ultimately, China cannot continue just throwing money at unproductive investment. It needs to create the right circumstances in which, or incentives in which, consumers can thrive and become a growth driver. It's doing the exact opposite.
Well, this is the tricky balance to find between communism and capitalism. Could this become a big crack in the state's social contract, so to speak?
Yes, it's a small crack right now, but actually the mortgage boycott is a very interesting development because it does give households a much bigger leverage, if you'd like. You know, in the past, even 5 years ago, the majority of housing was bought with savings, not with mortgages. Now mortgages as a share of GDP are almost close to Western levels. And in the past, households protested by gathering in front of developers, maybe trashing their property, but they couldn't do much more. If they lost their savings, they lost their savings. But now, having borrowed from the banks, they could threaten potentially a systemic crisis within the banking system if this spreads out. So they have a lot more leverage to express their discontent.
OK, Diana Scheulever there, an economist, talking to us about the various scandals at the moment hitting the Chinese property market and banking sector. Thank you very much for the insight. Very interesting stuff.
Thank you, Ben.